In the spring of 1982, 25-year-old Christine Prince lived in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Prince was from Portal, a small seaside village in Wales. She came to Toronto in October 1981 to be a living nanny for a family with a 3-year-old daughter. Prince was happy in Toronto. She enjoyed her job and made several friends. She even met a man and was engaged to be married. She was thinking of attending university in Toronto. She liked the city and felt safe walking alone, even late at night. June 21, 1982 was a rainy night in Toronto. Prince went to a movie theater with a friend. After the movie, she caught a bus that dropped her off close to the home where she was the nanny. She got off the bus around 1:30 a.m. about 5 blocks from her employer's home. Hours later, when her employer woke up and discovered that Prince had not returned home, they reported her missing. About 24 hours later, a motorist spotted Christine Prince's new dead body floating in the Rouge River about 30 mi from where she got off the bus. It was determined that the 25-year-old nanny had been sexually assaulted and beaten. She was dumped into the river while still alive and she drowned. After the murder made the news, 2 people contacted the police. The first was a woman who was seen walking close where Prince lived. She said the morning Prince was murdered. She found an umbrella in the middle of the road. Since it was raining, Prince was carrying an umbrella. Prince's employer confirmed it was her umbrella. The police believe that this indicates that she was forced into a car as she was walking from the bus stop to her home. Then a highway worker contacted the police. He found Prince's wallet on the side of the highway, not far from the body. The police think that after he dumped Prince in the river, as he was driving away, he tossed the wallet out the window. Immediately, there was speculation that Christine Prince wasn't the killer's first victim. Jennifer Isford was 19 years old and lived in North York, a city in the Greater Toronto area. She was training to be a cheerleader with the Toronto Argonauts, a team in the Canadian Football League. Is passionate about the arts and wanted to be a professional actress. About a month before Christine Prince was killed on the night of May 27, 1982, Isford went to cheerleader practice. She then went out for drinks with her fellow cheerleaders. She then traveled by subway and then got on a bus with a stop close to her home. She got off the bus around 1:30 a.m. A few hours later. 19-year-old Jennifer Isford's partially clad dead body was found on her neighbor's lawn. She had been sexually assaulted and strangled to death. The similarities between the 2 murders were obvious. Christine Prince was kidnapped about 10 miles away from where Jennifer Isford was killed a month earlier. Both victims were young white women who were walking home alone after 1:30 a.m. after getting off the bus. No arrests were made in either case, and they both went cold. Then in 1995, 13 years after the murders, the police made an arrest in one of the cases. 35-year-old William Bren Henson was charged with the murder of 19-year-old Jennifer Isford. Henson had been a suspect in her murder from the start. Hen had a criminal record involving sex crimes dating back to 1977 when he was just 17 years old. Is killed after she got off the bus. The bus driver told the police that he saw a young man get off at the same bus stop and he was walking in the same direction as Isford. The bus driver described the young man and his description sounded like Hennon. The police asked Henson for a sample of his saliva and he gave them some. It was compared to the semen sample. At the time, DNA testing was not available. What the testing did reveal was that the killer had type of blood. It was a secretrator. Henson had Ta-I blood and he was a secretrator, so the police were able to get a search warrant for his home. In his bedroom, they found a locked briefcase. In the briefcase was women's lingerie. One of co-chairers said she remembered that Isford wore pantyhose after rehearsal. The police did not find her pantyhose at the crime scene. On the briefcase, they found a pair of ripped pantyhose that matched the description of the pantyhose Isford wore that night. However, the police did not think that there was enough evidence to charge Henson. On July 13, 1982, a few weeks after the murder, Henson attacked a 19-year-old woman in her apartment building's elevator. He was charged with sexual assault, causing bodily harm and choking. He was convicted and sentenced to 5 years in prison. Henson served his entire sentence, and when he was released in 1993, the police issued a public warning that he was to be considered dangerous. In early 1995, the police were surveilling Henson. They collected a cigarette, but he had discarded. The crime lab was able to get a DNA sample and compared it to the DNA of Isford's killer. It was a match. On March 17, 1995, nearly 13 years to the day of 19-year-old Jennifer Isford's murder, William Henson was arrested. Henson went to trial 2 years later in March 1997. The trial lasted 2 months and the jury deliberated for 2 hours. Henson was found guilty of murder. He was sentenced to life without the chance of parole. One thing the police knew was that Henson did not kill Christine Prince. Prince was killed on June 22nd, and Henson was arrested on June 12th for attacking the 19-year-old woman in the elevator. So he was in jail when Prince was killed. So Christine Prince's case remained unsolved. However, the police did have Prince's killer's DNA, and it was uploaded to Canada's National DNA Data Bank. In 2016, the police were alerted that the DNA matched another unsolved murder. Over a year after Prince's murder, on September 1, 1983, 23-year-old Claire Sampson, who was doing sex work, was looking for clients outside of a hotel in Toronto. About 5 hours later, her new dead body was found in a field about 70 mi north of where she was last seen. Sampson had been shot twice in the head. Linking the two crimes did not provide any clues to the killer's identity. Then the following year in 2017, DNA linked a third murder to the killer. It happened in July 1997, over 15 years after Christine Prince was killed and 14 years after Claire Sampson was murdered. 41-year-old Gracelyn Greenidge was a nurse at a retirement home in North York. When she didn't come to work on July 29, 1997, a coworker went to her North York apartment. Inside was Greenidge's dead body. The cause of death was blood force trauma. The police found no connection between the three women besides being killed by the same man. The man's identity remained elusive. In 2022, the Toronto police contacted the private DNA lab, Author Inc. In 2025, they found a familiar branch of the killer. In December 2025, the police announced the identity of the killer. His name was Kenneth Smith. Smith would have been in his mid-30s when Christine Prince and Claire Sampson were murdered. The police have not released much information about Kenneth Smith. What is known is that he's from Porcupine, Ontario, which is now a neighborhood of Timmins, a city in northeast Ontario. He lived in different areas of Toronto at the time of the murders. The police also said that Smith was a convicted sex offender, but they did not give details about his convictions. In 2013, Smith moved 200 miles southwest of Toronto to Windsor, Ontario, a city across the river from Detroit, Michigan. The police were not able to charge Kenneth Smith with the murders of the three women. He died in Windsor in 2017 at age 72. The police said if he were still alive, they would arrest him, but they now consider the murders of Christine Prince, Claire Sampson, and Gracelyn Greenidge closed. The police think it's possible that Smith has other victims, and they are going to continue to investigate him and compare his DNA to DNA of unsolved cold cases. If he is connected to other cold cases, we'll provide an update in a future video. On August 5, 2014, a body was found floating in the Clark Fork River in Missoula, Montana. It was determined to be the body of 36-year-old Gilbert Barry, who went by the name Jack. His death had been brutal. He had been kicked repeatedly and stomped on. Lit cigarettes have been put up his nose. Gang symbols have been carved into his skin. The cause of death was a single gunshot to the head. The police learned that Barry was an unhoused man who lived in a nearby transient camp. The police talked to Barry's girlfriend. She said on July 30th, about a week before the body was found, she and Barry were at the camp. Two men whom she only knew as Phoenix and Kenny came to the camp with their girlfriends. Phoenix and Kenny also lived at the camp. They were drunk and began acting aggressively towards some people. Barry stood up to them and they attacked him. She said that Phoenix and Kenny's girlfriends led her away from the camp. When they were short distance away, she heard a gunshot. The police identified Phoenix as Kevin Lowe and Kenny was Kenneth Hickman. The police tracked down Hickman. Hickman admitted to being Jack Barry, who claimed he wasn't there when he was shot. The police tried to find Lowe, but he was nowhere to be found. Weeks later, Lena was found 800 miles away in Shreveport, Louisiana. He was arrested and extradited to Montana. In April 2015, Kenneth Hickman pleaded guilty to aggravated assault. He was sentenced to 15 years of prison with 5 years suspended. Weeks later, Lowe pleaded no contest to deliberate homicide. He was sentenced to 40 years of prison. Then in August 2018, Kevin Lowe was charged with another murder. This one happened 2 years before Leno killed Jack Barry over 2,500 miles away from Missoula in Boston, Massachusetts. On May 21, 2012, 45-year-old Norman Barrier was found bleeding from his head at the dog at Paul River Park in Charlestown, a Boston neighborhood. He was unresponsive and taken to the hospital. He never woke up and died 4 days later. It was determined he had been beaten in the head, and his death was considered a homicide. The police did not have any physical evidence. Instead, several people with knowledge of the murder implicated Lowe. He also confessed to several people. People questioned Lowe in prison in Montana. He made some incriminating statements. After Lowe was charged, he was extradited to Massachusetts. In 2019, Lowe pleaded guilty to murder and he was sentenced to life in prison. Then 6 years later, in August 2025, the district attorney in Middlesex County, Massachusetts, announced that they believe that Kevin Lowe is a serial killer. They said he committed his first murder in November 2010 in Elm, Massachusetts. Lena was living in an encampment of unhoused people in Elm. Also living there was 45-year-old Gary Melanson. Allegedly, Melanson repeatedly started a fire to stay warm. Lowe told him to stop using the fire because he thought it would attract the attention of the police or the fire department. When Melson didn't obey him, Lowe beat him to death with a metal baseball bat. The police also connected Lowe with a fourth murder. On August 2, 2012, 30-year-old Douglas Leon Clark was found unconscious on the banks of the Charles River in Cambridge, Massachusetts. He was taken to the hospital where he died. His death was labeled an accidental overdose. However, as the police were investigating the other murders, people told them that Lowe had killed Clark by giving him something called a hot shot. A hot shot is a lethal dose of a drug. At the time of his death, both Lowe and Clark were living in an encampment in Harvard Square in Cambridge. Lowe was trying to drive out all the heroin users. This led to a confrontation between Lowe and Clark. Selenino killed him by giving him a dose of heroin he knew would kill him. In August 2025, Kevin Lowe was charged with the murders of Douglas Leon Clark and Gary Melanson. The police have said they have little to no forensic evidence in the case. Instead, the cases are based on statements people made. These are not the only murders that Kevin Lowe is connected to. The gun Lowe used to shoot Jack Barry was never recovered, but it's believed that he got the gun from 25-year-old Monty Swanson. Swanson was friends with Lowe's accomplice, Kenneth Hickman, and he lived in the same transient camp as the two men. Supposedly, Swanson traded the gun to Lowe for a pit bull. When Lowe Basilo went to Shreveport after Barry's murder, Swanson went with him. 25-year-old Monty Swanson was never heard from or seen again. His disappearance remains unsolved. No trial date has been set for the murders of Gary Melanson and Douglas Leon Clark. Currently, 38-year-old Kevin Lowe is incarcerated at the Swa-Baranowski Correctional Center in Lancaster, Massachusetts. On March 2, 2020, 31-year-old Francisco Magana was gunned down on a street in Chicago, Illinois South Side. Witnesses reported seeing two shooters. One of them had walked up to Mana after he fell on the ground and pumped several more bullets into him. The crime seemed to be random and no arrests were made in the case in the wake of the murder. Cleo Acaso was 21 years old and lived in Chicago. He worked as a UPS driver, and he was the father of a young child. On August 4, 2020, he was double parked on a street on the south side. He had just picked up a friend. Suddenly, just after Caso's friend got into his car, a man in a car pulled up a Bissau's car and opened fire. Caso put up his hand to shield himself. The bullet went through his hand and into his head. He died 3 days later in the hospital. His friend was unharmed. On May 1, 2020, 16-year-old Damon Duran left his family's home in a ride-share car. He was dropped off at Gage Park on the southwest side of Chicago. As he stood in an alley, a young man in a hoodie walked up to him and shot him several times in the chest, neck, and head. By the time help arrived, Damien was dead. Luis Davos Garcia was a 26-year-old marketing representative. Nearly 2 months after the last murder, Davos Garcia was double parked outside his girlfriend's home in Chicago, South Side. Suddenly, a man driving a Lincoln MKZ pulled up beside him. The driver of the Lincoln shot the 26-year-old Davos Garcia to death and drove off. November 8, 2020 was supposed to be a happy day for 31-year-old Jose Martinez and his 3 children, who ages 3 to 9. They were going to pick up a new puppy. As they were driving to get the puppy, someone pulled up beside them and opened fire. The children were unharmed, but Martinez was killed. Hours later, around 2:00 a.m., 20-year-old Justin Gonzalez was driving home after dropping off a friend. He was shot to death as he was driving. After he was shot, his car rolled into a tree. Over 9 months, 6 people were seemingly shot at random in Chicago South Side. There seemed to be no connection between any of the victims. The police did have a clue in the murder of Luis Davos Garcia. The silver Lincoln MKZ was recorded on security cameras in the area. The sedan had 2 unique features, wraparound tail lights and a baby on board placard. 2 weeks after Davos Garcia was killed, the car was spotted by the police. They attempted to pull it over, but the driver took off. At one point, the driver stopped and let the passenger out. The police called off the chase when the car pulled onto the Skyway, which leads into Indiana. The passenger was arrested. He told the police that the driver was 17-year-old Antonio Reyes. The pastor also told the police that Antonio tossed a gun out the window. The gun was unique because it was two-toned and it had a laser sight. A week later, the gun was found by a landscaper and he turned it over to the police. The police investigate Antonio Reyes and learned that the car was registered in his ex-girlfriend's name. The police then got a search warrant for Antonio's Facebook. They found a conversation between Antonio and the young woman who was his girlfriend at the time. It happened just minutes before Luis Davos Garcia was killed. Antonio's girlfriend broke up with him and he was angry. He sent her a message saying, quote, "to go kill a king right now." King is a reference to a member of a Chicago street gang. Antonio also sent his girlfriend a video of him with a two-tone gun. Minutes after the message and video were sent, Davlo Garcia was shot to death. Davos Garcia was not a member of a gang. In December 2020, Antonio Reyes was arrested for Davo Garcia's murder. If the police believed he was involved in the other 5 murders, they did not reveal it at the time. In the media, Antonio was accused of killing Davos Garcia because he was angry that his girlfriend had broken up with him. The authorities also said that the violence didn't end after Antonio was arrested. They alleged that shortly after he was placed in jail, he called his friend, 18-year-old George Reyes. Although George and Antonio have the same last name, they are not related. Antonio told George that another one of his friends, 20-year-old Sebastian Serrano, was going to testify against him. Antonio told George to take care of Serrano. On Christmas Day 2020, another friend, Nitro Andre Giller, lured Serrano to Gage Park. George Ray has shot him multiple times. Both George and Giller were arrested. In 2022, Giller pleaded guilty to conspiracy against civil rights and he was sentenced to 18 months. 4 years later, in 2024, George Reyes pleaded guilty to murder and he was sentenced to 22 years of prison. In the 4 years after Antonio Reyes was arrested, the police investigated him in connection with the murders of Francisco M. Janney, Claudio Casio, Damon Duran, Jose Martinez, and Justin Gonzalez. By February 2025, the district attorney concluded that enough evidence to connect him to the 5 murders and he was charged. Although it's alleged he ordered the murder of Sebastian Serrano, he was not charged in connection with his murder. Since Antonio has not gone to trial yet, the police and the district attorney have not revealed much information about the evidence they have against him. What is known is that in some cases they have ballistic evidence. They've also said that Antonio's digital footprint is incriminating. The police said that all the victims were strangers to Antonio. However, the mother of 16-year-old Damon Duran says that isn't true. She said that her son and Antonio have been hanging out frequently before his murder. She believed that Antonio arranged for the ride-share driver to pick him up and bring him to the park. Damon's mother said that Antonio didn't pick him up in his car because she would have recognized it. Hours after discovering her son was murdered, Damon's mother had her daughter contact Antonio on Snapchat. Antonio claimed that when he last saw Damien, he was alive. Damon's mother accused him of lying and said he was involved in the murder. Antonio replied, quote, "That's why your son is going to rot in hell." After Antonio was charged with the additional 5 murders, it also became public that Antonio continued to be violent in jail. Notably, on November 22, 2022, while cellmate was sleeping, he attacked him with a shiv. The man was badly injured but survived. Antonio was charged with attempted murder. Not even sheriff's deputies were safe from Antonio. He exposed his genitals to a female deputy, quote, "for the purpose or effect of intimidating, harassing, or threatening," unquote. He was charged with public indecency in LW sexual display in a penal institution. There is one other tragic death connected to Antonio Reyes. In 2023, Antonio's 37-year-old mother was dinging one of Antonio's friends, 18-year-old Stephen Montano. On March 1, 2023, Antonio's mother called the police because she claimed Montano was threatening her with a gun. One of the officers who arrived on the scene was 32-year-old Andres Vasquez Lasso. He was married and had a young daughter. He had been a member of the police department for nearly 5 years. Montano ran to a nearby playground where children were playing. Vasquez Lasso chased him. Suddenly, Montano turned and shot at Vasquez Lasso. The officer was hit 5 times. Vasquez Lasso got his gun out and he returned fire. Montano was shot in the cheek. 32-year-old Andre Vasquez Lasso did not survive the shooting. Stephen Montano survived and he was charged with murder in July 2025. Montano was convicted of murder and he was sentenced to life. Antonio Reyes is currently weighing trial for the 6 murders. No trial date has been set.